Hey, Unchainers! This is Timmert, and you're listening to the Unchaining Me podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Unchaining Me podcast. So excited to be back after a long pause. Most of you have been asking me, what is going on? When is the next podcast coming out? What is happening with you? So thank you for trying to keep up with me and to ask what is happening with me and how I'm doing. I really appreciate y'all. And before I get started with this podcast, I'd like to say if you have little ones around, I think it's a good idea to put AirPods, earbuds, headphones, earphones, whatever you call them, on because I might go there. It might be that kind of podcast. So yeah, if you don't want your kids to hear some words, I think that might be a good idea. So yeah, this podcast, I want it to be about resilience. I think it's very fitting to talk about resilience because for me, coming back from this long pause, I'm realizing how much of that skill I'm utilizing, how much of resilience I normally really utilize in my life. I'm realizing that that's really a skill that I have. It's one of my strong skills. And how much of it we need right now in the world, how resilient we really have to be. It's not easy out there. Sometimes you have to be resilient from just watching the news. You just have to, reset from a conversation or reading the comment section or comparing your life from seeing something on social media from what someone posts. So there are so many things pulling us in every direction possible. Our attention is always being nudged and pulled in different directions. So it's harder to stay the course of some kind of normal or flow, consistent flow of things. So resilience is very, very important. So I kind of want to address the importance of resilience from two angles, and I'm going to go into it a little later. But I do want to address why the long pause, right? Without getting too deep into it. In the beginning, I really fought it. And that's kind of like a pattern for me. And it's my weak point. It's one of my weak points. And I'm working on it. As I always admit, I'm a work in progress. Some things are easier for me to understand on a cognitive level and to teach you guys. And, it's like, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. As parents, as teachers, we know how that is. It's easy to understand them, but then very difficult to practice them, to get them in our cells and in our nervous systems, because the programming and the indoctrination, the domestication, the subconscious level attachment to another way of living runs so deep in us. So it's hard. It's a lifelong process of unlearning and relearning and reparenting ourselves in a way to live a different way, to act a different way. So it's been really hard for me to allow to pause, to allow to rest for myself. So I know I needed it. I know my body was calling for it. My life was calling for it. I have a very dynamic family, dynamic life. Every 2 weeks, my son goes to school in a completely different county. I pick him up and drop him off. And that commute itself takes me at least 4 hours of my day. I'm driving him back and forth from school. We have little ones. Yes, we do have childcare at home for the youngest one. We're very fortunate with that. I know many people don't have that, but there's still a lot of demands with working from home, and also, transporting them, and the cooking and the cleaning and all of that. And we try and outsource a lot of the needs that we have as much as possible. And still there are the, emotional, the physical, the mental demands that come with raising the kind of family, the blend, the, toddler and teenager demands that we have. So I know that I need to care for my physical and mental and emotional health very, very often and regularly, because that's what I need. But then there's also this side of me that attaches my worth to what I do, to what I produce, to how I show up in the world. So these two parts of me are always fighting, and almost the same time every year, I struggle to balance that, to harmonize that. And this time around, it was no different. I felt the need to take a pause. I did, but I was fighting it in the beginning until I'm really grateful. I know how to ask for help when I need it. And so I went through that. And so towards the late, late winter, it got easier. I went into, the ebb and flow of things. And then I started savoring that rest. And I started then understanding the purpose of that. And it was easier than last time. And then last time was easier than the time before. And I think that's the purpose of resilience. Each time we get back up, it gets easier. Each time we rise back up, we understand the purpose of the fall a little bit better. So that's the purpose of self-mastery. And resilience is that. That is self-mastery. It is needed. It is crucial. It's a crucial skill. And that's the best thing. It's a skill. It's not a trait. You're not born with it. It's like you have it or you don't. It's not like that. It is something you can work on. It's a muscle you can strengthen. And just like any muscle, if you don't use it for a while, it wastes away. So it's good news to work on. So I want to start by talking about what is resilience, because the dictionary defines it as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And yes, it's the capacity to recover from difficulties, but I don't like the word quickly, because then it says, it kind of gives you this meaning of you need to bounce back from things and you got to do it quick. And I don't agree with that, because everybody has their own timing. How long you need to savor the lesson, to rest from something. What are you dealing with? What time do you need to understand the lessons that you need to squeeze out of that season of your life? What kind of support do you have around you? What kind of resistance are you facing? What kind of resources do you have? It's very conditional. It depends on a lot of things. And I think there's a lot of toxicity behind you having to do it quickly. You may not be able to recover and grieve a loss at a certain amount of time. And it's very counterproductive for you to feel like you need to do it quickly. Yes, there is such a thing as taking, too long. We might be staying in our winters too long. But how do we know that? I think we can cover that sometime later, after we cover the strategies of building resilience. But I want us to kind of cover what resilience means and why we need it. First of all, adversity is the name of the game of life. Challenges is the name of the game of life. We are going to face them. They are promised. When we live life, we are going to face challenges. Loss, death, they're part of it. We're promised. Imagine playing a game of cards, poker, or whatever it may be, and complaining about the rules as you're playing. Imagine shouting and screaming and crying about it and just depressed about why a certain rule is so. It's almost like that. Imagine hating winter every year and complaining why winter comes. In a way, that's what we do when something comes our way that is supposed to be part of life. Loss, death, change, mostly negative is what we complain about. Positive changes, we don't really have a problem with those, right? But when shit hits the fan and we lose something, we lose someone, heartbreak happens, someone dies, we fail, that's when we have a problem with life. But setbacks, loss, grief, sickness, mental illness, ours or that of a family members or friends, addiction, financial difficulties, midlife crisis. There is a reason, there is purpose to all of that, because we can't always rise or grow or gain or laugh or live. We can't always go forward. We can't always be healthy. We can't always be happy, or it can't always be summer, or we can't always be well, or we can't always be young. So there is this universal law that every living thing abides by and does not have a problem living with or living by. It so happens that we have a problem with it somehow. I tend to believe that it is the evolution of our brains that brought about this separation, right? This issue that we have with how things are. You don't see animals depressed and angry about how things go, the ebb and flow of life. You don't see them negating the flow of it, but we do. And that's why we ended up needing resilience or needing to be resilient. Imagine us being okay and congruent with the flow of life. We may not even need to be resilient. The seasons come, we're good. Loss comes, we grieve it and we move on. We get hurt, we patch it up, we recognize it and we move on, right? But we somehow hold on to what we want. Our brain tells us we should always be happy. We choose and pick what we want and we reject what we don't. And that ends up hurting us. So that's why resilience is what we need. This is one angle to see resilience from. The other way that we can see resilience and how we need it and how it is crucial is in the things that we want to achieve, right? And the things that we pursue. One of my favorite authors, Steven Pressfield, wrote a book, The War of Art. Yes, you heard me right. It's not the art of war. Every person, almost everybody I tell about this book tries to correct me. Oh, it's the art of war. Nope. It is the war of art. Any creative, any entrepreneur, any artist needs to read this book, because if you are pursuing anything worth pursuing in life, you are going to face resistance. Resistance, if I remember properly, how he defines it is that we all have two lives, the lives we live and the unlived lives that we have within us. And someone else, I don't know who, but someone else says, the graveyard is the site where you find the most unlived lives and buried dreams, right? So that's what Steven Pressfield also refers to when he says the unlived lives within us that we dream about, that we wish we lived. So those are the two lives we have, the lives we live and the lives that we wish we lived. And what stands in between is resistance. Resistance is what you hit once you start walking towards your dreams or taking strides towards your dreams, but then something stops you dead in your tracks, or you give way to it, or something comes like a dip. Or there's also another book called The Dip, which also talks about the same thing, which is resistance. And when Steven Pressfield talks about where you may be facing resistance, he lists it like this. I wrote it down to read to you. This is what he says. The title is Resistance's Greatest Hits, or like the aims, or where resistance may hit you at, the spots. The following is a list, in no particular order, of those activities that most commonly elicit resistance. Number 1, the pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art, however marginal or unconventional. Number 2, the launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise, for profit or otherwise. Number 3, any diet or health regimen. Number 4, any program of spiritual advancement. Number 5, any activity whose aim is tighter abdominals. Number 6, any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit or addiction. Number 7, education of every kind. Number 8, any act of political, moral, or ethical courage, including the decision to change for the better some unworthy pattern of thought or conduct in ourselves. Number 9, the undertaking of any enterprise or endeavor whose aim is to help others. Number 10, any act that entails commitment of the heart, the decision to get married, to have a child, to weather a rocky patch in a relationship. Number 11, the taking of any principled stand in the face of adversity. So, I don't think any of you guys listening out there did not find yourselves or your dreams mentioned in the list that I just mentioned. Anything worth pursuing, anything worth living for, anything doing was just listed. So resistance attacks any of these things, which then means we need resilience to get back up if we're going to achieve any of these things. We need resilience. None of our dreams, none of our pursuits that are worth pursuing are safe and immune from resistance. I don't care how accomplished you are. I don't care how big of self-will, motivation, inspiration, smarts, intelligence you have, how well organized you are going to face resistance at some point. You may be riding a high wave right now. You may not be depressed or sad or facing a dip or in resistance or feeling sorry for yourself right now. You may not be in winter right now in the season of your pursuits right now. I get it. And great. But seasons are as real as anything. So the seasons will change on you at some point. Accept that. It's okay. If you accept that, you are ahead of the game. You are one step ahead of resistance because you're already preparing to be resilient. That is the main thing about resilience. If it sneaks up on you, if resistance sneaks up on you, you are at a disadvantage to then be resilient. Because the energy it takes you to then recover from the shock, from the depression, from the why me, from the how come, from the I'm not good enough, from the here I go again, that's going to make it that much harder to be resilient. right? So these are the two angles that I want you to look at the need for resilience. The first one is the things that you cannot control, the normal, the ebb and flow of life, the seasons that life brings, which is the loss, changes, life and death cycles, right? Sickness, adversities, those kind of things. And then resistance in pursuing your dreams, in pursuing anything worth pursuing. In many ways, they're similar, but in some ways, they're not. But what they have in common is in both, you need resilience. The purpose of resilience is tied to the purpose of the setback that precedes it. The setback that made you require resilience, the setback that got you to the place of, in that low place, in that dip. The purpose is there. There is gold in that place, in that dip. There's so many questions you can ask while you are in that dip, in that low place, in that failure, in that sad place that you can use to then spring back into resilience. You can find purpose in there. I don't think I need to convince you any further about why you need resilience. It is one of the best skills that you can have in life. It is one of the best skills you can teach your kids. It's not the straight A's that get them far in life. It's the resilience. It is knowing how to get back up, because they will get knocked down. They will. Their grades are not what's going to save them. It's this skill that's going to keep them going. So you may be hearing all this and you don't need to be sold on the need to be resilient. And you're saying, okay, how do I become more resilient? What are the strategies? How do I teach my kids to be more resilient? What is the shift I need to make? Let's get to the entree here. Let's get to it. Here are the strategies that I came up with. The first one, in like a subsection type of way, is all about to do with attitude. Your attitude. Of course, it is internal. Of course, it's an inside job. Because who's going to be resilient? You. No one else is going to make you resilient. It's an inside job. It is how you see something. It is, you are the seer, right? You are the looker. And this subsection of attitude can be seen from 3 different angles. The first one is your attitude of what happens has to be from the place of shit happens. It's as simple as that. You have to have the attitude of shit happens. It makes a big difference. Like I said earlier, if you are the kind of person who gets shell-shocked whenever shit happens, that's going to be an uphill battle to resilience for you. Radical acceptance. I have a whole podcast episode on radical acceptance. It's one of the first episodes, maybe the second or the third episode. So feel free to go and explore that further at your will. Like I said earlier, tough times are part of the deal. Things will go wrong, probably when you least expect them. Don't go around anticipating things to go wrong. Don't go around being anxious, but have a healthy expectation of things to go wrong. Okay? And when they do go wrong, do not take them personally. Because you're merely a player in the game, and every other player is also under the rules of the game. They're also dealt similar cards. Trust me, you're not the only one. So whenever you hear yourself saying, why me? As quickly as possible, follow it up with the question, why not me? Why not me? Why not me? People may not show it, or you may not be listening or paying attention, but every single person on the planet is fighting something you may not know something about of. Or you may not know nothing about of. It could be different. You know, the 1% rich up there may not be worrying about the bills they're going to pay, but they got demons they're worrying about. Everyone has demons they're fighting. So shit happens. Things do go wrong. Do not take it personal. That is an energy zapper. And it makes resilience that much harder to come. Or to practice, rather. The second attitude shift you need to make in order to cultivate resilience is selecting where your attention goes. Your mind is your slave. Whatever your attention goes, or wherever, rather, your attention goes, will be miraculously almost magnified. I've mentioned it a few times before. If you're thinking white SUVs, the highway will be flooded with white SUVs all of a sudden because you'll be seeing them everywhere. If you're thinking red shoes, all of a sudden every person you see or every magazine you look at will have red shoes on them. It's not because all of a sudden the statistics have changed and people are driving white SUVs on a higher scale or wearing red shoes all of a sudden on a higher scale. No. Your mind notices what has grabbed your attention and it's telling you, here, there's more of it. Here, there's another one here that you were thinking about earlier. Here's that. Here's that. It's like a little kid who's telling you, here's a bus, mommy. Here's a bus, mommy. You said a bus earlier. Here. That's what your brain does. So if you're seeing negative, if you're thinking negative, your mind will find negative and offer it to you. It thinks it's helping. And remember, it's also an evolutionary benefit to focus on the negative because, millennia years ago, it saved you to think negative. It saved you to notice tigers versus, say a plant, right? So use your brain to your advantage, and through looking at what's going right in your life, shift your focus from what's going wrong to what's going right. And you will see that multiply. And that gives you energy to then practice resilience. Dial up the positive by practicing gratitude. Could be through a gratitude journal. It could be through prayer. It could be through just saying it to yourself. I'm thankful for this in my life. I'm thankful for that in my life. Oh, how beautiful is that I have this in my life. I have her. I have him in my life. Be intentional about finding good in your life. You'll be surprised how much more good you see. And then you'll find even more energy to then bounce back up. So that is the second attitude shift. The third, and one of my favorites, as simple as it may sound, is shifting your attitude from the very seductive feeling or seeming permanence to the truth of impermanence, absolutely nothing lasts forever. Fortunately and unfortunately, depending on what it is you're looking at, right? If you love summer, unfortunately, it does not last forever. If you hate winter or, dislike winter, fortunately, it doesn't last forever. Spring is around the corner. So as consuming as it may be when you go through tough times, when you go through dips, when resistance is there, when the heartache feels like, you're just going to be there forever. It's going to ache like that forever. It's really not. Nothing, absolutely nothing lasts forever. That is the law of the universe. And you are not immune from it. So these 3 seemingly simple attitude shifts would get you closer to practicing resilience much more easier. And the more you practice it, it doesn't mean all of a sudden you'll be resilient. And, I'm telling you, I'm working on that piece year in and year out as much as I preach it. But you'll feel the muscle getting stronger each time you're working on it. And that's the beauty of self-mastery. It gets easier each time. The other piece to build resilience is really being honest with yourself. Because when you are in a place of, failure and winter and that place of helplessness, one of the things that you don't have any of is control. That's what makes you feel like you are down and lost and you don't have any way to get back up, is because you don't have control. So you remain down, you remain lost and weak. How you bring back control in that situation is by asking yourself, is what I am doing helping me or harming me? Just saying the sentence, whether or not you believe you are doing something, because when someone feels like they're not in control, they are least likely to think they're doing something or not doing something because, they're not in control. So they feel like they're being victimized. Something else external, someone else external is doing something to them. So they are at the receiving end of an action that comes from the external. But just saying this sentence has this power to make you realize that you are definitely participating in this process. Is what I am doing helping or harming me? And then journal what happens. Write down what comes up to you. What you are doing will present itself to you. Where you are staying, the thoughts you are believing, you are allowing, the downward spiral you're going down those thoughts. Is that helping? Or is it keeping you stuck where you are? Where will you be if you continued being where you are? What if you chose something different? What if you interrupted the pattern? See how that's bringing more power to you? See how that's giving you a little bit more control? That way you can interrupt that pattern of helplessness. Another very important concept is that of purpose. Whenever we think of purpose, a lot of people think as if it's some kind of, this fairy tale type of message in a bottle. It comes to you, you open the bottle, there's this magically handwritten notes that gives you your purpose, and yay, it's one thing, and then you go and do it and you live happily ever after doing it. No, purpose is a very dynamic thing. Purpose is not something that's given to you and you become, enriched by it, and it's this glorious thing that happens to you. It comes by you asking, what is life asking out of me? It comes from this idea of servitude versus I want to be given something so it can enrich my life, so I can feel fulfilled by doing it, so I can feel gratified by doing it. No, that's not the concept. The concept is, what is life asking out of me in this season? And your purpose is dynamic. Your purpose when you are a mom is very different when your kids are small in that season versus when they're a little older and life is asking something different out of you, and you feeling connected to yourself is key to realize what life is asking out of you in that moment. You being connected to yourself into the present moment is key for you to know without any confusion, right? So meaning is very important. So when you're in that low place, when you feel beat down, asking yourself, what is life asking out of me now? What meaning can I find out of this season now? And then listen. The best example for this is Viktor Frankl. I mean, you cannot tell me a worst ordeal or disaster or challenge, adversity in life than being locked up in a concentration camp, smelling gas, seeing hundreds of people line up naked to go inside gas chambers and clearing out their dead bodies and digging grave sites for them, and people being tortured and you not knowing when your turn is going to come, losing all your family, being overworked, underfed, malnourished, abused, living day in and day out in subhuman conditions, losing your identity, who you are, your humanity. Imagine finding meaning there. Imagine finding resilience there through finding your meaning and purpose there. That story brings tears to my eyes when I speak it, when I think of it, because it's profound. Viktor Frankl had an opportunity to escape. His fellow inmates told him there was a way to get out of the concentration camps. They were going to attempt and make a run for it. And he thought about it and declined. He made a conscious decision to stay where he found meaning. In his dip, he found purpose. And there he found freedom. We may not make such extreme decisions in our lives. We may not find such profound meanings in our dips. But the lesson is to ask these questions, to ask for what is the meaning here? Just ask that question. The meaning could be, hey, listen for the lessons and get the hell out of here. It could be that. It could be escape, run away, get out of this marriage, get out of this relationship, ditch this friend. It's not good for you. This friendship is killing you, draining you. This job is not for you. It could be run. But then do we listen? Do we ask, what is life asking out of me in this season of my low? What is this winter needing out of me? What does resilience looking like? Do we ask and do we take the time to listen? Do we seek purpose in our lows? What do we engage our minds and our hearts while we are in our lows? Do we invite resistance that way? That is the big question. And talking a little bit about the resistance, right? When we're pursuing our dreams, that kind of pursuing resilience from resistance, right? That I was talking about earlier. A great approach for that would be, before the resistance happens, being very realistic about what we may face. We know what our resistance is going to be. I'm trying to write my book. I know what my resistance is going to be. I know time is a problem with my life. I got to be realistic. I know some of my habits are difficult to keep. Rising up early. It's been a struggle to rise up at 5. So I fell off the wagon. Resistance hit me there. So I adjusted it to rising up at 6 instead. You know how resistance will meet you. You know where it will attack. So before you start that project, have a leg up. Be a step ahead. And ask yourself, where are my weak points? Where will resistance hit me? When you started your New Year resolutions, be realistic about where resistance might rise up. That will help you in a few ways. First, you won't be shell-shocked when it does. So you won't waste energy beating yourself up for having been faced by resistance, which will give you more energy to then be more resilient, to be more, to brainstorm a way to be resilient. Okay, how do I then pick up the wreckage, pick up the pieces, and then move forward from here? How do I patch this up? How do I fix this? How do I move forward? What is it that I'm going to do? What have I learned from this resistance? Why did my plan fail? What did I not see? Where were my blind spots? So doing that is very important. Being realistic is very, very important. This last point is very profound, especially for me, because this was the thing I did very differently this time around. And my eyes are opened brighter this time than any other time. And that is leaning into spirituality and values. I have been a seeker for most of my adult life, spiritually. I've allowed myself to freely question and doubt. Maybe in one podcast, I will talk openly about that. It's a very intimate thing for me because I'm not in a place where I can share my journey. It's still very personal for me. And lately, last few years, things have been happening in my life. People have been coming into my life where I felt like, okay, that cannot be a coincidence. I think alike with this person. This person asks the same questions as I do, or this person kind of practices similar things, but they're not really organized, if you know what I mean. And what happened past few months was things became more crisp for me, for my mind's eye. And people truly, not really in a vague way, people came into my life to really stay. I formed friendships. I formed sisterhoods. I found myself a spiritual coach that is really helping me make sense of what has been happening in my life, spiritually speaking, what my longing, my seeking has been. And I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't make sense of it. I was busy working on my personal development and reaching out and serving and being a coach. And that, of course, has played a big role, of course, spiritually too. I am one human, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I am one in all, right? So they all kind of lean on to each other. So spirituality has been huge. Seeing myself as a divine soul, having a human experience, has made things that has given me such a crisp perspective for being resilient. I'm taking it as my birthright, not just a good personal development move, which it remains to be, but it's my birthright. It's not even a question getting back up. It is how the seasons are. It is how the Creator made it to be. It is how I was made. I was made to go through the seasons. I was made to die, to rest, to be born again, to rise up, to blossom, to shine, to flourish, to wilt, to die, and go through it all over again. And that is the majesty and beauty of life. And everything bows to that. Everything in life bows to that. Friendships do, projects do, like every single thing. Nature does, relationships do. You name it, it's governed by it. And you too deserve it. You deserve to rise back up. Don't make it bad news, but you will also fall. You will. Your seasons will come and your seasons will go. You won't always grow. You won't always laugh. You won't always rise. You won't always be healthy. But you will always get back up because resilience is your birthright. I hope this podcast was worth the wait for you. It was for me. Please pass it to your friends, to your family, to whoever you believe will be blessed by it. I will see you in another podcast sometime, maybe next week, maybe not, based on my flow, ebb and flow. But I love you. Happy unchaining. And don't forget to support by liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing with your family and friends. Thank you so much, and see you with the next episode.